Issue 45. We start out with Snively saying to Eggman that even if he doesn't like jungles, for good reasons, that he'll conquer it and put a command center in it for him. And Uncle Chuck warns Sonic and his friends about this. Just like I thought, of course the caveman Moby wouldn't be safe in there, but I wasn't expecting this to actually happen on screen. I honestly thought they would forget about him, we'd never see him again. Sally decides to tell her friends to split up into teams of 2 and get the jungle dwellers to move deeper into the jungle. Okay, what if the jungle dwellers don't listen to you or can't speak English? How would they be able to communicate to them something as complicated as this, even with pictures? After Sally says she's going to try to come up with a plan for the Eco Destroyer, Sonic runs ahead, expecting Rotor to follow the path he'll make through the jungle with his speed. Which, considering how most of the time he slows down to let his friends keep up, this is pretty out of character for him. Sonic's lucky he actually realized Rotor ended up not following him anymore to study rare berries. Because with him being so far ahead of him, he shouldn't have even known there was a problem. Also, why would he know about rare berries? It's not like he's a berryologist, he's an engineer. How does this fall into his line of interest? Eating some of those berries caused Sonic to fall asleep, something Rotor wanted to try to warn Sonic about before he started eating them. And he falls asleep right as him and Rotor are being ambushed by gorilla Mobians. You know, what if those berries were poisonous? Would his fast-acting impulsiveness have gotten him killed? Conveniently, that's what I was expecting because they'd never be able to survive otherwise. They don't get killed by gorillas, and instead we cut to hours later at the jungle camp, where the jungle dwellers, who conveniently speak English despite being primitive tribes, arrogantly insist that Eggman will never find their camp. They also kidnap Rotor for being both an inventor and a cook, meaning he's needed to prepare meals and weapons for them. Except we clearly see that they already have weapons from the outside hut shot, and if they need him, why are they surviving just fine without him all this time? And also, Mobian stew. That always bothers me. It's like he's not from Mobius. Wouldn't he just call it stew? Why is he talking as if he's familiar with the stews of other planets and thus knows what the particular Mobian specialty is? Sonic says cheerfully that there's tons of weapons hidden nearby, and he'll bring them back in exchange for his and Rotor's freedom. For some reason, the gullible gorillas agree to this when Sonic could very well be lying, even though they're skeptical and warn him that if he tries to escape and doesn't bring them the weapons first, Rotor will suffer for it. Wow, these guys are dicks. Point is, if they're already that skeptical, why are they even letting him out of their sight? Sonic thinks about how they don't know how fast he is. How could anyone not know how fast Sonic the Hedgehog is? At least it is justified in this case, a little, since primitive jungle dwellers probably don't have a phone line or TV, so news travels slower to them. The community is very isolated. Unfortunately, Sonic accidentally threw the guard of the weapons supply hut into the wheelbarrow with the weapons, and got himself and Rotor chained to trees like a bunch of slaves. Hold on a minute, if they already had a whole bunch of weapons that are way too advanced in technology for a bunch of jungle dwellers, then why did they feel the need to force Rotor to make even more for them? Rotor shows compassion and selflessness by saying that Sonic could have escaped if it weren't for him. I wonder if this means Sally's plan to send Sonic to the jungle with a partner slowing him down was a bad idea. And if, well, I mean, I guess he still would have eaten the berries. Except not, because the only reason he stopped and thus ate the berries is because of Rotor. In a pretty dark twist, in a good way of course, it's revealed that the gorilla Mobians used to be gentle and timid, but fighting Robotnik and his bots had changed them, and now they're tough and fearless, as in assholes. But they're jungle warriors, they hunt. Wouldn't they have been this way all along? If they were gentle and timid, they wouldn't have had the heart to kill animals to survive, which is what jungle dwellers have to do. Of course, just as the ape out of nowhere boasts that Robotnik would never dare to invade their camp, he does exactly that by landing a huge invention from the sky. Is Snively really delusional enough to think that Eggman would ever promote him? Besides, he's already the second in command, how could he possibly get a promotion? Sonic stays brave in the face of danger by making fun of Snively and saying that he's not the one who captured him. Maybe the gorillas should have thought twice before imprisoning a competent hero who could have saved their lives. And it's just then when in a Chekhov's gun, the other team that Sally had sent into the jungle comes defeating all the robots in a big damn heroes moment, with Bunny and Tails fighting them with Moby. They had been on their way back to Knothole, taking Moby with them when they had spotted that giant eco-destroyer. That's what that was supposed to be? Okay, then it's hard to tell what it is based on the design. I'd imagine a giant laser scooter from the sky to be the eco-destroyer, not the same thing they used to land here. So how much trouble is Moby gonna cause when he's brought to Knothole? None of that is ever addressed. All of the gorillas just now fall asleep rather than having been asleep the whole time, as Rotor had used the special berries on them as a way to escape, so he had access to their food when he was chained to that tree. How? This is a nice version of the Chekhov's gun, or an inversion I guess, where the berries come up again in an attempt to be a helpful Chekhov's gun, but end up being detrimental instead. Moby frees Sonic from his chain, and after Bunny explains that if the eco-destroyer is turned on while Sonic's in it, he'll be destroyed, Sonic tells Tails to distract him for him while he loosens a few thousand bolts, with his invisible screwdriver. And the plan works beautifully. It's pretty nice how Sonic actually gets an apology from the gorillas after the way they treated him, even if it is just one dialogue bubble. See issue 40? That's how you do it. And the sleeping berries come up one last time because Moby had gotten himself to sleep from eating stew. Problem is, Sonic's assumed he'll be asleep for a few days. That basically required treating him like he's in a coma to keep from surviving for that long, wouldn't it? Anyways, the next story has Knuckles actually meet the Enchantress, starting off with her amusingly petting his head. Based on what Knuckles is thinking, it looks like he's been put under a spell and forced to be a slave, although his thoughts are still his own, meaning that even an Enchantress isn't better at making a slave than a Robotnik. Wait, he seriously forgot Tails' name. It's so easy to remember. Either that or he doesn't respect him enough to think of him as anything other than the kid. You'd think he'd at least say Two-Tailed Kid. Then we see a brief glimpse of Knuckles avoiding the charlatan's imaginary forces, and a text blurb reveals that there was actually a whole story dedicated to that, and I got cheated out of it because for some reason they put it in the Sonic Live special where it didn't belong. When I first read that text blurb, I hadn't read the charlatan story because I was under the impression I was unable to review that special because I couldn't find it anywhere, or I thought I couldn't. Turns out I had to click an extra link. But because of its main story sounding obviously non-canon, I'd assumed that skipping Sonic Live wouldn't be a problem, and then I find out that apparently they put a canon story that's special for some reason. Well, at least they were nice enough to include in the recap so that people who didn't read Sonic Live could at least get an idea of what they were cheated out of. That alone makes me forgive the recap for wasting comic space, because it actually did help me follow along at the time. Then it's explained that Knuckles had enlisted the help of the Chaotix so that no one would be guarding the Emerald apparently, and used his Book of Myths once again, and he had believed the charlatan's clue of the Land of Dark to be an old name for the outskirts of Angel Island's Forbidden Zone. I think that's the place Knuckles' father abandoned him in. So that was a lucky guess. Unfortunately, Knuckles had been attacked by two beings, one of whom used lightning and barely missed them. Based on the Ancient Walkers' warnings, he realized that they must have been a sorcerer and the Enchantress. Also, sorcerer is spelled wrong again. I spelled it that way and Microsoft Word underlined it. Anyways, he then explains that he's been made the first in her unwilling army of slaves, and she basically wants to do the same to the Chaotix. So basically she wants to do the same thing that Robotnik's doing, but without roboticization per se, and without ruining the environment. Okay, so it's a good thing for Eggman that she's never come face to face with him, because that kind of overpowered power should have just let her mind control him. But then that'd be the end of his threateningness, so I guess we can't have that. Even for an interesting story arc where she would get to be the main villain for once. Knuckles thinks, based on clues as the sorcerer uses magic pointlessly out of boredom, that the sorcerer doesn't hang with other powerful mystics. And therefore he wouldn't hang out with his girlfriend, the Enchantress, if she was that powerful. Okay, so apparently I'm expected to believe that someone who can brainwash someone effortlessly is not powerful. I call absolute bullshit on that. Even if that was her only spell, that'd still be ridiculously useful. That'd be the only spell you'd ever need. You'd never have to do anything yourself again. Which would make your life feel very boring and unfulfilling. You wouldn't be accomplishing anything yourself. But that's not the point. I'm not really sure if the sorcerer is actually her boyfriend, or if she, like for all I knew, she just brainwashed him too. Knuckles realizes, using his clues from the Ancient Walkers, that because he doesn't see a paladin yet, he just has to be patient. Gee, it sure is a good thing that he has a perfect memory for those clues, and didn't forget even a little bit of them, or he'd be pretty much screwed. Also, why is he even bothering to think about how she might fall to a good uppercut if his body's not his own? So he can't do it. And if his body is not his own, why was he able to put his body in a thinking with his hand on his chin stance when that wouldn't have benefited the Enchantress in any way? Finally, after days, the Paladin shows up in a sudden big damn hero's moment and fights the Enchantress unbrainwashed because of his magical sword. So, why did the Ancient Walkers talk as if Knuckles would have to face the Paladin, as if he was going to be a bad guy? The Paladins distracted the Enchantress enough to break her mental grip on him and let him do what he wants. Unfortunately, he's smart enough to choose to fight the Sorcerer instead, or else he'd have been brainwashed again in an instant. That's the thing. Knuckles isn't stupid in this issue by any means. He's doing a lot of reflecting on the clues he had gotten and figuring out the smart courses of action based on that. I don't like how he's able to make the Sorcerer's magic talisman vanish just by saying the right words, though. Are they really charmed so that anyone can say those words from a spell and have them react right to it? I don't imagine spells to work like that, even if they arbitrarily required magic words, as if they'd even understand what magic words would mean. So the bad guys get defeated, and in a pleasant surprise, the Paladin actually lets Knuckles explain himself instead of arbitrarily attacking him like I was expecting. And they were nice enough to skip past most of Knuckles' recap on the situation. Wish they did that for Sonic and King Acorn's conversation. I like how they actually bothered to explain the Paladin. He had left his post in King Acorn's royal guard when the call came upon him to purge black magic from all the realms. He then says that his sword is not from the kings and instead from the Ancient Walkers. And Knuckles arrogantly says that he's their #1 boss if he did something to actually earn their arbitrary favor, even though he had sworn earlier that he would go on the mission alone, that it was a personal mission of his. Wait, that makes me wonder why he even asked for the Chaotix to help at all. Now all of a sudden he's gone from a loner to even asking a paladin he never met before for help. At least he's wisening up. But alas, the paladin says no because his sworn oath demands the total purging of all evil magicians before he'll journey to the next leg of the Holy Crusade. Ugh, another line that reminds me of a certain real-life religion. Do they really have to have him say that in a Sonic comic? I am proud of him for saying evil magicians, though. He's not discriminatory enough to just generalize all magicians as evil. I expected worse from the way he was talking all hyper self-righteous like. The Paladin picks up the unconscious Enchantress and drags the Sorcerer behind him, making me worry that he hasn't finished them off yet and that they'll wake up and finish him off. And he at least is nice enough to give Knuckles some good advice. He tells him to locate the evil Matthias Poe at Damocles the Elder. Is it Damocles or Damocles? And how does he expect to know where to go to find them? Knuckles asks the weirdest question ever, and where do they hang their hats? Well, I guess I was being too literal-minded. It took me several seconds to realize that he was speaking in an informal metaphor and meant to say, where do they live? You could have just said that. I don't imagine Knuckles being the type of guy to talk informally with idioms like that. That's more Sonic's thing. Knuckles is a serious, formal guy who takes himself way too seriously. Then the Paladin tells him to look to the floating island's other caverns filled with chaos, instead of one particular cave with chaos that has no other unique qualities to it. Would it kill him to just give him a better hint? Why the hell is he speaking in riddles instead of being upfront with him? Doesn't he want King Acorn to be cured? I'm guessing by chaos he means full of magical chaos energy. But how is Knuckles supposed to know which one to go in? And Knuckles' quest concludes next issue. Thank you for not dragging the story arc for longer than it needs to. The first story was written by Angelo, and I was pretty surprised that instead of being another story about Moby, it was about inexplicably rude tribal people instead. I guess that was for the best since there's only so much you can do with a caveman who can't talk and needs to be communicated with using pictures. But the story was just frustrating because of how Sonic and Rotor were being treated. You'd think it would have occurred to these ungrateful civilians that if they keep some of the main heroes of the world, the most competent people in the rebellion against Eggman, chained to their trees, Eggman will just benefit from that and terrible things would happen. How about Knothole going down, everyone in it being roboticized, all that stuff. It does make clever use of the Chekhov's gun though, with the berries even being a reverse sort where they're an inconvenience multiple times instead because of a failed attempt to invoke the trope once. In the second story, written by Ken Penders and Kent Taylor in a unique joint effort, I feel like it was dedicated to making it clear that Knuckles isn't a brainless moron. He's gotta be smarter than you'd think if he's putting together what to do based off stupid riddles so easily. He's not really stupid, just a little gullible and short-tempered, quick to violence and suspicion. He's more complicated than just stupid. I think I've actually grown to like Knuckles. I especially like how sometimes he reveals insecurity, making himself more relatable and sympathetic, thinking sometimes that he's not as confident as he looks. You never see that in games. The whole medieval thing with an enchantress, sorcerer, and paladin isn't out of place to me. This is taking place in a magic-filled fantasy universe where an absolute monarch king is still supported, after all. A world with King Acorn in it makes sense to still have paladins as long as they're part of his royal guard. So it's actually justified, the whole medieval thing. This was a pretty pleasant surprise, I gotta say. I just wish I hadn't been robbed of seeing Knuckles as dealing with the charlatan, because they put that story as a backup story. I mean, specials shouldn't have backup stories. And speaking of special, next up is the Sonic Blast special.